And welcome once again to another episode of the Horizon Roundtable. I'm Bob McDonald, and with me this episode, of course, my co-host Jimmy Lemke.
Hey everybody, how's it going?
And Jimmy, of course, is on Twitter at PantherU and at PantherU.com. And be sure to follow the Horizon Roundtable on Twitter at HorizonRT. Jimmy, I guess I should apologize for taking up the entire time of last episode.
Well, that's really more my fault than it was yours.
How so? I'm the one who was talking the whole time.
Well, it's because I wasn't there.
No. But that was not your fault.
Well,
for those of you scoring at home, and I hope you are, this is actually the second episode we're doing this week. The first one was my interview with Cleveland State's head coach Dennis Felton, which was a really great conversation. And
I don't want to give you the idea that I wasn't expecting anything out of you, but I was quite impressed by the interview. I thought it was great.
Thank you.
He was more candid than I was expecting. Overall, it was a good interview. It's always good to get a chance to talk to the coaches in the off season, because that's when they're always excited about their team because there's always something going on. And sometimes people just don't get to see what's happening, so they like to get that little check-in. There's no games on the court, so you can't really check in on the team. So it's nice to get that little update every now and then and hear from the coaches and hear what's going on with the team.
Sure. Yeah, I was really happy to get that together. And again, I cannot thank Greg Murphy over at Cleveland, their SAD over at Cleveland State, enough for helping me set that one up. Again, true saint.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that kind of struck me in that, aside from the last 5 minutes where the end of the conversation where we talked about George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic, had I but known that would have been a great icebreaker, I would have started off with that.
Well, honestly, I don't know why we don't just call this the Horizon and Bootsy Collins podcast.
Because this is literally the first time we've talked about Bootsy Collins. Actually, Bootsy didn't even come up.
Well,
yeah.
I'm just thinking of old Greg. Have you ever seen that video? The old Greg.
Probably. It's been a while. I'm sure.
It's like a 12-year-old video. It's British comedy, I guess. And it's
if that's what they call it.
It's kind of ridiculous. This guy's fishing in a lake, and he pulls up a fish, except it's just a guy dressed he's a scatterman fish named Old Greg. And it's absolutely ridiculous. If you like absurd videos, if you like drinking Baileys out of a shoe, I would highly recommend checking out Old Greg. And they get funky with some boots, so with a funky ball covered with tits, not teats, and Bootsy Collins is mentioned.
There we go. I was wondering where that was going.
Well, I was expecting you had actually seen the video and we'd be able to call it back. If you've seen Old Greg, there's no way you wouldn't be able to call it back. So I'm assuming you probably actually haven't.
Probably not. If it's that old, probably not. Now I have to look that up. So
because it's
yeah. So one of the other things that
yeah, we're gonna talk about Old Greg in the next podcast. But
okay, good to know.
This is a podcast about basketball, so we should talk about basketball. Covenant teams.
Oh, jeez. All right. So, it's interesting because the one thing that kind of did strike me is I know Coach Felton has for like the last year plus kind of pretty much focused his entire program around this idea of positionless basketball, and I know that's something that kind of struck you a little bit when you took a look at the podcast, the interview.
Well, in Milwaukee, in Milwaukee, the biggest thing right now is Giannis Antetokounmpo. So this idea that like basketball isn't a sport with positions, or at least somebody who can play all kinds of positions, it's a big deal. And it's really popular around here lately. And this idea that you can bring this into mid-major basketball, I think part of it's about the roster. He doesn't have a guy who's a obvious center because maybe he doesn't have anybody on the roster as an obvious center. Part of recruiting in mid-major basketball is taking those people who are tweeners who don't fit into what other what the high major schools recruit for. Mm-hmm. So maybe you're pulling a guy who is athletic and long, but he's really thin. He's rail thin, so he's maybe not like somebody that could really bang down low, but he's got the skill set to do all that stuff. He's just not that guy. So you can't have him full time down low. And a lot of times when mid-major players end up moving up to the next level to the NBA, or transferring to the high majors because they're tweeners where they've kind of found their way and they got skill sets that maybe, they develop skills that maybe other kids didn't develop at the high major level because they were set in specific positions. So I'm thinking about guys like Robert Covington, who got on the 76ers, who was at Tennessee State, and he was kind of he didn't exactly fit any like NCAA Division I idea of small forward, power forward, whatever, but he could kind of do a little bit of everything, and over his time at Tennessee State developed that, and then he became a worthy player of an NBA spot, and then he's developed even more, and now he's even better. So to keep myself from droning on, being able to put out an entire roster of players that can play all kinds of positions and do all kinds of things just gives you all kinds of versatility with your roster that you otherwise wouldn't have.
Yeah.
So it's important.
Yeah. And if you look at the Cleveland State roster right now, that's basically what he's got set up right now. I mean, he's got he's got those traditional guards, but he's also got a lot of those kids who you would call tweeners, who are athletic, 6'5", 6'6", could play easily the 2 through 4 easily, especially in mid-major in a mid-major environment, and do pretty well. So I think that is that's definitely this idea of that this whole entire concept is kind of what he's focusing on, and he's definitely got he's definitely recruited around that philosophy.
I didn't catch about 80% of what you just said there. There's a little bit of a distortion there.
Bummer. Hate when that happens. Yeah. What I said was he's recruited around that entire philosophy of he's got kids who are 6'5", 6'6". Again, a kid, some of the kids who are coming in who are those long kids who are rail thin, like last year when he brought Steph Kenich in, this year where he brings in Spider Johnson, guys like that.
Yeah, Spider Johnson's an exciting basketball player. I think he can develop into something special.
I'm really looking.
They got a couple guys. They got a couple guys like that where they could be in a couple good spots and develop into some nice players. I'm excited for them.
I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, especially Spider Johnson, Rashad Williams, especially Rashad Williams. That kid is. I've seen highlights on Williams over the during high school, and that kid is gonna be something, especially when you got Tyree Appleby sitting next to him on the court.
Yeah. Rashad Williams is worth the price of admission. That's a player you can kind of build a team to support. You can see that a lot of people were really worried about a lot of the defections in that first off season and then this off season a little bit, and people are worried about it. And I look at it as this is just kind of like the colon cleanse. It's not
sure,
to say
let's
that
go with that.
Not that to say those kids are shit. They're good kids. It's just that they were part of the Waters. Yeah, they're Waters recruits, Waters players. They came to play for somebody, and then they're having to play for somebody else. I'm sure that even if they liked Felton, it's different than what they came to do. So they may be a little, they may be a little bit disappointed about it. So it's okay. It's good. It's not always a bad thing for players to leave.
Yeah.
Sometimes the things don't match up, and it's just better for all parties if they move on, because then that frees up a scholarship, of which they've got 4 now. So,
yeah. Well, you always have to. I always bake into the cake the almost like clockwork fan freak out when those types of things happen. I mean, for like a month, I was reading fans openly worrying that Steph Kenich was going to transfer somewhere. No, Steph Kenich isn't going anywhere. He's staying where he is, guys. He's good. Him and we talked a little. We also did talk about. We definitely talked about Kenich. We talked about Cash Thomas, and we definitely talked about Tyree Appleby, who. As Coach Felton had stated, is the type of guy who does not expect to lose another game throughout his college career. I'm totally good with that. I don't know about anybody else in the Horizon League, but I'm good with that.
You need to have kids that have that killer instinct, that idea that they have to kill what you eat, and you have to have this idea that if you're gonna eat, that means somebody else can't eat. So, a kid for Appleby, you get a kid like it. I think Williams is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other thing was
kind of change the culture a little bit.
Yeah,
they'll show that this is a. We're here to win. We're not here to develop. We're not here to do it. We're here to win. And that's actually a good thing, because then that'll pick up from where they that'll pick up with the other players, and they'll feed off of it. We saw it here about 9 years. Oh my God, 9 years ago. About 8 years ago, 9 years ago, when we brought in when Chad Boudreau recruited Kalen Williams from Kirkwood. He had played at Evansville 2 years, and he had played at Evansville for 2 years. He played for a year, played at a junior college in Iowa, and then he played for us for 2 years. And we had a lot of kids that were hard workers and hard playing kids, and they were kids that would, they were kids that were always ready to go. But we didn't have anybody who was just pardon my French. We didn't have anybody who was an asshole on the court to the other team. Everybody was a nice guy. And Kalen Williams comes in, and he had that bandage on his shoulder because he had to cover up a tattoo that wasn't safe for children's eyes. He was a bad dude. But when I say bad dude, I mean like he's a guy you don't want to mess with. And that was exactly what our team needed, was for somebody to come in and be like, you know what? screw this team. We're going to come in, we're going to fight, we're going to beat them. And that kid, he came in after in the 2010 offseason, and it was like a light switch with the team. They all fed off of it. They all kind of got this idea that, okay, we don't have to just be, we don't have to just be like one of the better teams. Like, we can be the team. We don't care that Butler just went to a Final Four. We'll punch him in the mouth. And he had a triple-double against them. And we beat them 2 out of 3 games that next year, and we won a title because he was the kid that had that killer instinct that was just infectious with the rest of the team. I mean, you guys got to see how it affected Tony Meyer in Cleveland towards the end of that season.
Mm-hmm.
That 2010-11, that was it, like late February of 2011, when we went down to Cleveland after you guys had pantsed us in Milwaukee, and then Tony Meyer just went off for, what was it, like 30 points or something.
Yeah.
And it was something that Tony could always do, but he was never doing against the best teams. And Cleveland State was one of the best teams that year, co-champions. So it was and I would say that without Kalen Williams, if we just had somebody who came in that was just a distributor or something, we wouldn't have been able to do that.
Yeah.
If you look at all of the teams that in the Horizon League over the last, since I've been here, at least since 05, 06, all the teams that really had all the teams that were winning championships, they all had somebody who came in and would not accept losing.
Yeah.
That didn't want to lose another game, as Felton says.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You remember Janathan Bullock was like that.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he was just a bull in a china shop running around. For us, it was Tybee. For Green Bay, it was Sykes.
Yep. For Northern Kentucky, it's Drew McDonald. Yeah,
Drew McDonald is a guy who does not. He doesn't fight, or he doesn't give up the fight. He's always looking for that next spot.
Yeah.
So for Felton to talk about that on Appleby,
mm-hmm. And that's the other thing. That's
a big state if culture change.
Yeah.
There's
absolutely.
Nothing more important. Right.
Yeah. And I think, and he also brought up the fact that, when you got a guy like that, he's like, he buys into the point where he is helping is a big boost and a big help when it comes to bringing guys in for recruiting trips. And, he couldn't say enough about that. And I think that's probably true anywhere else around the league. And one other thing too, he did mention the fact that the team is planning to go to Europe this year, Italy, I believe. So and he was really, he's really looking forward to that because that's going to give him some extra time, especially with all these new faces, to kind of get these guys together at a time where he wouldn't necessarily be able to before.
You get a high level of bonding that you don't otherwise have because it's an experience that most of those kids, if not all of them, have never had. This opportunity to leave the country and go see somewhere else. You said they're going to Italy?
That's right. And he did mention that most of these kids have never been out of the country before. And
it's funny because in 2010, summer 2010, we went to Italy and then won a championship.
Yeah.
And then won a championship. I mean, in fact, when our wonderful athletic director had canceled our 2015 summer trip. God, I hate that I keep bringing up this woman, but she keeps sticking herself in there. She canceled it and said that it wouldn't look good, because of the private money. Whatever. I'm not getting into that. I had done the research and found that every team that went overseas on some level of a foreign trip in the summer previous, every single one of those teams turned out to have at least a share of a championship. regular
Yeah.
season or tournament championship.
That's true. That is you are absolutely right.
That is absolutely ridiculous. For the last 13 years, that's been the case.
Yeah.
Butler, Cleveland State, Detroit, Valparaiso,
yes.
us. You cannot go forward. Like you cannot go to on a foreign trip and not get a major boost. I think I found it was something like the teams won on average of 4.6 more victories than the season before. On the flip side, they lost about 3.5 fewer games than the season before. Obviously, that's just some moving around, but sometimes that's enough to put a team over the hump. Now, for Cleveland State, I wouldn't turn around and expect that to happen this year. I wouldn't expect have a championship this year, but this idea that a kid like Appleby expects that to happen is a big deal because it changes the culture.
Yeah.
And Felton is a guy who can turn things around fast. We've seen him do it before.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen him do it before. So knowing that he's like that, and knowing that the teams get 2 weeks of practices, 5 games against mostly full professional teams.
Mm-hmm.
This bonding experience of a foreign trip that not just bonds them to themselves, but to the team and to the program. I get to go on this trip because of what Cleveland State did for me. Mm-hmm. That's something that I don't think people think about all that much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we didn't lose anybody special to transfer. That just wasn't something that would happen. So it's a huge deal for Cleveland State to be able to do this. And maybe you're not winning a championship this year, but don't tell Appleby that.
No.
and you never know, because we were talking about it, about the recruits, after the signing period, seeing maybe nobody's gonna. Maybe we don't think anybody's going to take on Northern Kentucky, but honestly, you never know with this conference.
This is
Wright
true.
State gets picked for 9th. Wright State gets picked for 9th and goes to championship game. We get picked for 9th and we win the championship in 14. Like there's so many. It's so hard to predict, especially now.
Yeah.
Especially now when this conference has fallen off. There's absolutely the possibility for a team to come in, put a few major pieces together, and go on a run and win the championship and represent the Horizon League in the NCAA tournament. So it very well could be Cleveland State. That's the kind of program, man. That's the kind of program.
I'd be totally okay with that. I think the other thing too, and I think this is, given that, and to your point about the boost in wins. After as a result of having a summer trip of any sort, you're talking about a Cleveland State team that how many games last year did they lose by less than 2 or 3 points? How many of those? I mean, they were they were like 12-23. Out of that 23 losses, I could point out at least half of those losses that could have swung another way. And if this is an opportunity to swing the pendulum on the winning side, I'm totally all for it. And given that nucleus that they have with Kenich, with Appleby, with Thomas, and with because they've got that kid from DePaul, Al Eichelberger, coming in too. He's been practicing, and I know he's chomping at the bit to get on the court right now. You got those guys in, and even though you're a super young team, and they are a super young team. I don't think they have any seniors coming back. You still have kind of this core that they've got the talent, and in Appleby you've got the swagger. that could certainly make some things happen. I definitely do not see that, as everybody has said over, ever since the end of the season, this is not a Cleveland State team that is going to backslide. I don't think this is definitely not that type of team.
Oh, I would not expect that at all. If they'd had a backslide, then that would just be a year where Felton brought in some guys that he wasn't expecting to kind of be the players. They didn't turn out to be what he was looking for, and that very well could be the case. I mean, that sometimes that happens. There are misses on recruiting, but when you have a guy like Felton who's been around for 20 plus years, guy who coached with Herrick, I don't expect that guy to miss on a lot of recruits. Actually,
he's the coach who replaced Herrick. Remember?
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah.
The guy who replaced Herrick at Georgia. Yeah.
And and how much of a mess was Georgia after Herrick left? Seriously.
Rough. They were real rough.
So, I mean, this was not even anywhere near that big a wreck. So, no, and even, and you talk about the recruits that, you might miss on, but at the same time, who before last year heard of, Steph Kenich? I mean, the guy was playing. He actually missed the summer because he was paying for the Serbian national team. Yeah. He didn't. He just came out of nowhere, and now he gets the summer that he didn't have last year to develop. So imagine what he's going to be like this year.
Well, I mean, I don't know how the strength and conditioning coach situation is over there.
Yeah.
I don't know how it is like Cleveland, at that school, but they've got, summers are always great.
Yeah.
Always great for at least, half the kids. Some kids will, you never know what's going on with some people because maybe there's something going on in their life. Maybe they don't have the opportunities and you just don't know about it to develop. We had that with a couple kids where people will be like, wow, this kid regressed this year. It's like, yeah, but you didn't know that he had, you didn't know that he spent half the summer in the hospital, or you didn't know that he spent a bunch of time with his, he's about a bunch of time out because he was, in like rehab or something. Like sometimes there's just sometimes you just don't hear about things with players. So, hopefully he takes the summer and really works on his game. One thing I think a lot of kids need is they need to not be, they need the time away from it.
Yeah.
Because when you're in school full time and you're a player full time, you need that release of not being a full-time athlete and full-time student. That's why I didn't think it was all entirely that good that these guys were able to play a bunch of summer practices. I mean, it's good that we get it, but I'm glad that they didn't make it year round.
Sure.
They very well could have allowed the teams to just do 10 practices a week year round if they wanted to, but I'm glad that they didn't because the kids need a break. And that's also what summer is about, getting a break and getting some perspective.
Yeah. Even the pros get an off season.
That's right.
So that was it. Again, that the one thing that I also did want to touch on today, this episode, is the recruiting period's over. I mean, the signing period's over. Obviously, you may still get a couple of grad transfer signings and kids who enroll a little late because, again, it's Cleveland State situation. That's what happened in Steph Kenich's situation, and they still have a couple of scholarships to give. But by and large, I know we did talk about where Northern Kentucky is at, and like you said, you never know, especially with what we have, just the volatility within the conference. But do you see, other than kind of some surprise, like maybe a Cleveland State just it does far better than any of us ever expected and kind of leapfrogs over everybody in year 2 of the Felton era, which I personally would think would be awesome. But obviously I'm realistic.
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem is that as long as we have this format for the conference tournament, there's always going to be a much higher possibility of somebody coming up from the lower level,
Sure,
to knock somebody off in the tournament. And I think part of it's actually become the norm because people expect it. I think that this conference tournament really has become the tournament of the people who are not in the conference because of reputation. So I worry about maybe they'll come into it and think about it that, hey, this is all the best teams haven't done it. That means we have to do it differently. We have to make sure that we don't take the first game lightly or whatever they got to do. But at the same time, all that stuff has happened.
Yeah.
So you never know if you're doing it the right way because you won't know until you lose.
That's true.
And because this conference is so down, even over the regular season, the chance that somebody can come in and knock you off is pretty high. I mean, look at Oakland. Oakland had a team coming in this year that we were sure, so many people were sure that was the team, that there wasn't going to be, Northern Kentucky was, kind of close with the talent. UIC was in the neighborhood with the talent. Wright State had a good coach and maybe not quite as much talent, but they could get. It was just, but we all were pretty sure Oakland was going to be the team.
And they weren't.
That losing to Youngstown State in the semifinal or the quarterfinals was kind of that was a fluke, and that there's no way Greg Campy's gonna let that fluke that fluke continue. There's no way that's gonna let that become a norm. But they didn't beat the player, and part of it's because they had some new guys come in there. But part of it's just the conference was so hectic. You have a couple injuries that kind of change how the makeup of the team is. Maybe the guy, Kendrick Nunn, maybe it was a good player, but maybe he didn't quite fit the way they were hoping he would. And all of a sudden, it was a wide open thing, and Oakland wasn't nearly the far and away best team in the conference this year.
No.
So we look at Northern Kentucky's roster and we think, well, they've kept a lot of these players together. I mean, who did they lose? I want to make sure I recap this. Who does Northern Kentucky lose?
Carson Williams.
Last year's team.
They lost Carson Williams and they lost Faulkner. I think those are the only two I can think of. I know, and there might be one or two others, but Faulkner and Williams were the two that they lost.
Okay. So it's not completely they haven't lost everything. They didn't lose McDonald.
No.
They didn't lose they didn't lose a bunch of players that makes it impossible for them to do well.
No.
So they'll probably be fine.
Yeah. And I think at this point in time I think I still am of the opinion that the league is theirs to lose, but there's always that possibility where they run into a quarterfinal matchup of which they don't get past again.
There is no player. If there's anything the Horizon League has convinced me of in the last couple of years is that there's no team who has it and it's theirs to lose. That's just ain't the case anymore.
Well, I guess when your one seeds always seem to lose in the conference tournament, that tends to happen.
Yeah, right.
So, well, I guess we wouldn't be remiss if we weren't on Detroit Mercy Coach Watch still. This I feel like, I feel like every time I say that, I hearken back to the Anchorman thing, Panda Watch.
Panda Watch.
They won't interview us because the panda would kill us. Panda jerk.
Well, get up! Start moving.
But yeah, this is it, the saga is still going on. Seriously, I did an entire episode where I was thinking, yeah, they're going to make the announcement this week, and it's like this was 2 weeks ago, the last episode, and it still didn't happen. But allegedly, there's a new name out in the mix, in Mike Davis.
Yeah.
Formerly of UAB, formerly of Indiana, now currently at Texas Southern.
Well, I will say this, especially at a school like Detroit, where the research isn't as big of a thing. Mm-hmm. There are very few hires at a university that are as important to get right as the men's basketball coach.
Yep.
Because if you have a good men's basketball coach, if you have a really good men's basketball coach and they can do something really special with a basketball team, it can make or break a university in a lot of ways. We are seeing the benefits of Loyola hiring Porter Moser, taking advantage of those facilities that MVC move. He was the right guy, and we're seeing the article that Darren Ravel had on ESPN.com, Loyola's donations to the athletic department raised 27%. Loyola's donations to the university raised 660%.
Man.
That's enormous. I mean, that is just flat out so important for a university. And I sent that to Mark Money, our chancellor, and I said, you know what, this is why you should actually be involved in the hiring process of your basketball coach.
Yeah.
I realized that you got all that, you had second thoughts after the Jeter firing about hiring TJ Otzelberger, so you changed your mind and hired LaVall Jordan. It worked out. Both of those coaches are great. But the last year, he wasn't even there for the interview process. He wasn't there to interview Dana Ford. He wasn't there to interview Pat Baldwin. He let Amanda Braun made that decision. So if Pat Baldwin doesn't turn out to be a coach, in my mind, the chancellor has that. It takes has a big big part of the blame on that as well. Not just her, because she's an axe wound terrible person, but.
Well, the other issue here with Detroit is we don't know who's involved in the process, because they're on lockdown as far as information.
Part of it's the private school thing, and that's okay, because part of it's about part of it's about making sure that you're doing your due diligence. And I'm okay with it being private as long as somebody's actually doing the job. If they are giving it, if it's taking this time because they want to make sure that they take all of the time they need to get it right, then that's one thing. If they're taking all this time because they're literally offering it to anybody and everybody's saying no, then that's a much worse problem, because what you don't want is to find that Detroit hasn't picked a guy because they have picked a guy and every guy has said no, or maybe they can't even get somebody to interview. I mean, I've literally heard like Lindsey Hunter's name come up
multiple times.
They're just like, let's. What about this person? What about this guy?
Mm-hmm. Mike Davis coming into Detroit would be kind of an interesting situation.
Not because like a possible coach. It's just Detroit. Just there's it's so much. It's on the surface, on everywhere else. It's such a bad idea for a job, And then on top of that, it's such a bad idea for it. It's just it doesn't seem like anything special about this job. It's not the job that it was in the 70s. It's not the job that it was in 2007 or 2008 or whenever Ray McCallum Sr. took the job. But then you flip it around, and now it's worse. They've had so many scandals, and so many players have gotten in trouble. And the university's finances are in such incredible disarray, and the neighborhood's not getting better, and there's zero interest. And unlike some of our schools, Madison's over an hour away. Columbus ain't down the street from Cleveland State. Ann Arbor is like a half-hour drive from UDM's campus.
Something like that, yeah.
So they've got such an uphill battle that I worry that a few of these coaches are interviewing for the job, and they're thinking, damn, there's only 350 of these jobs, and I want one. Obviously, Mike Davis has one at the moment, but do I really want to go work there when the last coach only lasted 2 years? And the coach before that was fired because the only success he had was with his own highly rated recruit's son. And the guy before him before that guy had a lot of success, but it was it was a decade before he retired. I mean, and do I really want to is it really like a great Division I program when I'm playing in front of the same 300 people every game? Detroit Mercy's got some real problems. And Carrick brought up Carrick and do we have Matt from Oakland when you guys did the battle royale?
Carrick and Matt. That's right.
Yeah, so we had Carrick and Matt, and they were both talking about how I think you brought up how Felton's been recruiting Detroit.
Yes, he has.
And both of them have been saying, we started saying, well, yeah, but the level of talent in the city of Detroit has just completely fallen off. And if you look at it, like a lot of these, maybe they've got a few recruits, but the talent pool really, I mean, he's right. It's not what it was. Carrick actually took it as an insult that Clarkson with Dylan Alderson and those guys would win the state championship. That a suburban school goes and wins a suburban non-Detroit school wins a state title. That it's like an insult, but that's what happens when the talent's not there. So if I'm a coach and I'm looking at Detroit Mercy as a possible place to take my services, and I'm a coach that could get a Division I head coaching job.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at Detroit and seeing it's in complete disarray. The money is in a bad spot. There's little to no support for the program. The talent pool for recruiting is weak. The player is going to Ann Arbor or Michigan State or anywhere else because the scouts are still there. Even though the talent's fallen off, the scouts are still in Detroit. You have an NBA team down the street.
Yep.
So there's NBA scouts are there, which means that there's going to be college scouts seeing these players. I look at Detroit Mercy as a no-win job. It has one thing going for it, and it's having the conference tournament in their house. That hasn't done squat for them so far. But it's like the one real positive that the program has, in my opinion. Also, if they really wanted to cook the books and get into being a banded program, they can do that. But I mean, I wouldn't look at it as a positive as a coach.
So when you look at a Mike Davis who's been in, what would be the appeal for him then? I mean, is it because
the appeal? Yeah, the appeal for a Mike Davis, being the Indiana head coach, UAB, now Texas Southern. I mean, this is a guy he's been working himself down the food chain, and he's had enough success at the bottom of the Division I head coaching food chain that he can get back up a rung. So that's what I'm seeing if I'm Mike Davis. I'm also seeing a conference that is eminently winnable if I can get players to play for me. This is a conference that you can win. You can come in. You can come in June. You can take a job. You can put together a couple recruits, maybe get one little gem in there. Take a full season to recruit guys, and you're recruiting guys to say, hey, you're going to step in and be the guy, or be the starters immediately. That's something that certain teams can't do. And you're Mike Davis, who's been in the national championship game, who's been he's been a great coach for a very long time. And I look at that I look at, if I'm Mike Davis, I think that maybe I could be the guy that could turn the program around. And if you can turn around Detroit Mercy and turn Detroit Mercy into a Horizon League championship program for men's basketball, without the benefit of like having your son as a recruit, as Ray Sr. had, like legitimately doing it. If you can turn Detroit Mercy around, you can get that next job. That's Mike Davis. I would look at it as I can come into Detroit if I can make that work. And if he believes he can make it work, he could look at maybe, you're not looking at a job like an Ohio State job, but you could look at being like the next Penn State head coach.
Sure.
Or you could be the next Rutgers head coach, or you could be the next, you could get hired in to be the next Seton Hall coach. These guys, that's the opportunity that's there for, somebody who's been around the block a bunch, but they've had their opportunity with the high major and they squandered it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
They can get back at that high major. I mean, he was at Indiana, and following Bobby Knight, nobody, you can't follow a coach like Bobby Knight and be a success in a lot of people's eyes. You got to remember, in Indiana, a lot of those people saw the real enemies were the administration, not Bobby Knight. So and it's really truly been a hell of a time for all of those guys coming out of it.
Yeah.
So him, Sampson, Crean, all of those guys have been, have had a hell of a time trying to placate the Indiana faithful. But
True.
at Detroit Mercy, it's going to be hard. Mike Davis, he might be the guy. If he's willing to take it, if he truly believes he can succeed in that spot, then I would say go for it.
Yep.
And if I were Detroit Mercy, I would pay him what I could, because Mike Davis is a good coach. I truly believe that Mike Davis is a good basketball coach.
Sure.
So I would believe that Mike Davis could be the guy. It's just a matter of whether Mike Davis believes he could do that or not.
And he may. I mean, he may. I mean, maybe that's why his name has come up, because he's at Texas Southern right now, and he's been to the NCAA tournament, I think, at least 3 times in that situation. And the other thing too with Texas Southern, when he first got hired, he got hired in like August of 2012.
Yeah.
So he already knows. So he's already
had the late off season hiring.
Mm-hmm. So he's kind of been down that road before, and it's not a deterrent for him. So I think you're probably, if you're looking at, if Mike Davis does make it to Detroit Mercy, I think you're kind of onto something there, where if he can show everybody he can turn this program around that's just so low at this point in time. That's the potential for some, maybe not the top tier coaching jobs out there, but maybe a 10 State, maybe a Rutgers that also needs that help down the road.
Absolutely.
So all right. So with that, we will close out this episode. Just a programming note. Next, we will be probably back in sometime in June. We will definitely not be recording on Memorial Day weekend. So everybody enjoy that holiday.
I should definitely explain another reason why we might not be back for a while. I'm moving. So Number one, if anybody wants to buy a beautiful house in the Candy Cane Lane neighborhood of West Allis, Wisconsin, call my parents and make an offer. 3 bedrooms. It's great. It's just my dad and I are fixing it up so he can sell this house. My wife and I are moving on June 1st into her parents' house for a month. Yay. And we'll spend that month living there. And then we will be moving into our new townhouse on July 1st. And in the middle of that, I'm going to help my sister move on June 10th. So we definitely won't have an episode recorded on June 10th. But I'm moving 3 households in a month and fixing up this household.
Yeah. Month of June's going to be interesting for Jimmy.
Yeah, Jimmy, send your well wishes. I might start a GoFundMe account so that I can, pay for some kind of sedatives to keep me sane.
So be like we said before at the beginning of the podcast. Just follow us on Twitter at HorizonRT. We'll definitely have some updates on when the next podcast is going to be. It's just kind of June's probably iffy at this point.
Well, we might find a Sunday morning in June to record something. So
yeah. So stay posted there. As always, episodes of the Horizon Roundtable can be found on sportshacks.com. sportshax.com, and always you can find podcasts where you can find podcasts. Link, tune in. What is it? iTunes, Stitcher, you name it. You're in Pocket Cast.
I'm on Pocket Cast. I've got this. I'll get a nice reminder that this will happen in a few days. That hey, by the way, you were talking on a podcast, so look forward to that.
There you go. All right. So Google Play. I use Google Play Music. So, all right. So
absolutely.
So again, as always, thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
Take care, everybody.